Hello, this is Tyler Håkonsen, and you're listening to the Not Snowboarding podcast.
Welcome to the Not Snowboarding podcast, a delightfully tasteful glimpse into the other side of snowboarding.
Happy holidays. I'm your host, Nate Mousson. My goal with this podcast is to bring you each week a conversation with an interesting, funny, or inspirational person involved in the snowboarding industry. This week's chat is with someone that is truly an inspiration to me, someone that's currently battling cancer, someone that gets his chemo treatments and goes snowboarding the following day. His name is Chris Mountjoy. But before we jump into the conversation with Chris, a quick word from our sponsor. I've briefly mentioned on previous episodes that in addition to the podcast, I run a company called Shred Soles Snowboard Boot Insoles. Shred Soles traces its roots back to 1995 when I moved to the East Coast from Montana and started working in a ski and snowboard shop with my Uncle Scott. He was a snowboard racer and an expert boot fitter. He and I carpooled to work together and would talk about different business ideas. We always came back to the idea of a snowboarding-specific insole company that stemmed from one of the things that he was big into with the snowboard racing, which was canting his bindings. Canting is like angling the way the bindings mount to the board, which would give him more leverage for quicker turn response and better edge hold. We always joked about making a canted insole so this effect could be created right at the first point of contact with the feet. Fast forward 10 years later, and I was now the expert boot fitter and manager at a snowboard shop in Maryland. I was the go-to guy in the area for someone whose snowboard boots were causing them pain. And I still had the idea that Scott and I had discussed in the back of my head. So, long story short, I made some crude prototypes and did a bunch of testing and finally launched Shred Soles in 2009. Shred Soles are canted to realign your ankles, knees, and hips to a more natural and balanced riding posture and also grant more leverage like what Scott was seeking on his race board. The arch is engineered to support your arch muscle as it expands and contracts as you transition from toe to heel and vice versa. The heel cup is designed to sink the heel as deep into the boot as possible, locking it into place, reducing and eliminating the dreaded heel lift that so many experience on their toe side turns. Most importantly, they're super comfortable, right? And they're backed by a 90-day, no-risk satisfaction guarantee. We also have a full line of boot fitting aids available and a free ebook I wrote, which is all about snowboard boot fitting and picking the right boots in the first place. Shred Soles is running a Cyber Monday discount right now, and it's for $10 off and free shipping. But for the podcast audience, I really want to do one better. So you can use the discount code TNSP for the Not Snowboarding podcast to get $15 off and free shipping throughout the month of December. Let's transition into the conversation with Chris. We talked chronologically through his early days as a skate snow rat in Maryland, and onto his snowboarding career, entrepreneurial ventures with creating his own snowboard company, and as he puts it, a Rob Dyrdek-like fantasy factory in Bozeman, Montana. And we end talking about his current battle with lung cancer. I'm so psyched to be able to talk with you, and I started the podcast, I brainstormed a list of just hundreds of people that I wanted to talk to, and you were right up at the top because of something you said to me probably 4 years ago when we were snowboarding at Big Sky. I think we were either on the tram or just getting off the tram near the top, and there was this big group of skiers, and they were all wearing like full face motorcycle helmets, and you just said, "You can't fight the mountain, bro."
I mean, I honestly believe that. I feel like those people they're out there going to war.
But for whatever reason, that phrase, every time I see somebody with any helmet, whether it's a skateboard helmet or anything, I think about it, and I think about it every day. So, I mean, you said it so casually, and I hear your words whenever I see somebody with a helmet, or when I put a helmet on myself. I just think like, what am I doing? You know, am I really going to use this helmet? Yeah. And then I think about it at the bigger level too. Like what does it mean beyond just the helmet?
Well, I've had a fall where I was basically in the mountain's hands, and this would have been since I saw you and made that comment, and it's completely up to the mountain whether I had a helmet or not. I mean, I feel it probably would have gave me a pretty good serving up, but I guess I figured it wasn't my time, or I wasn't the one the mountain was trying to beat up, or something. But this mountain is, you've been here a few times. There's no joke about life or death here.
And that was inbounds the fall?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of shark's teeth here that, for lack of a better way to explain it, or say a cheese grater or something like that. And I mean, this is completely in bounds, and you could go from no rocks anywhere around you to right through a cheese grater or a set of shark's teeth, and I mean, it would just shred a helmet.
Yeah, I remember maybe not the first time, but one of the first times when I was young at Big Sky and kind of traversing across a spot on the bowl and looking down just like, hey, there's this wide open powder field. Why is nobody hitting that? Right. We're going to go ride where it's tracked. And my buddy who was a local there was like, dude, do not go through there. It looks good. You'll probably won't live. Your board will get rocks all the way through it. It's like you don't do that.
That's a funny place for that. That's all over the place too. That's not just a few areas.
So wanted to talk to you today a little bit about growing up in the Washington, D.C. area and moving back to moving to Montana. What kind of sparked that move? And for me, it's particularly interesting because I went the other way, right? I grew up in Montana, and now I'm out here. Yeah, we kind of rapped out about that a few years ago, and we were in Big Sky. Like, dude, I went the fucking wrong way. But you worked at Intensity Skates at one point too, right?
My whole life, pretty much. And all the way through to when it was East Coast Urethane and Nicotine and Capital Skateboards and all that good stuff.
So there were always stories when I moved out here about you could go dig through the trash outside of there and get like junk wheels.
Yeah, probably could get some wheels. I don't think mini decks or anything. I'm sure that times there was probably some clothes or shoes, and that was a great time, and we had lots of skaters come through and demos. I mean, we were the East Coast CCS. It was a big business at the time.
Well, I worked at Pit Crew for many years, 13 years when I moved out here, shortly after I moved out here, and the guys that were my age and a little bit older would always talk about the Intensity demos, and there were even some pictures in Pit Crew that predate Pit Crew of all the, like you said, all the pros coming through for demos at Intensity and jump ramps being set up and all kinds of cool stuff. So maybe if you could go back a little bit to when you started skateboarding and how you transitioned to Intensity, and then what kind of sparked the idea to move to Montana.
Yeah, it actually started, there was another shop originally called Caravan, and it was like a surf skate. They had some snow stuff, and they had hockey equipment, and there was an employee there named Mike, and my grandma would always bring me in, and so they just always got a kick out of me because my grandma would always bring me in, and we were kind of into all the sports of the stores, so she would be picking up hockey equipment for me, or skateboards, or boogie boarding stuff for the ocean in the summertime, and then those first round of snowboards came in, and some of my buddies picked those up. I didn't really get in on the first round of them, and the one buddy in particular that I would ride his snowboard, he rode regular foot, so back then, boards only had one direction, and the nose and the tail, and they were very distinct. There was no riding that board backwards. So initially, I had to strap in regular footed as a goofy footed skateboarder and try to learn to snowboard that way. We would go up to the Maryland golf course. That's where we would pretty much get it done at, and just build kicker style stuff, like almost we were trying to replicate our launch ramps out of snow, and just basically practice jumping or trying to ride down this hill. And we spent days, every time it snowed, we'd spend every minute that we could out there trying to learn to ride these things. And then I guess eventually I got my first board myself, which was a Woody, Burton Woody. And oddly, the Woodies were small at the time. Most boards were like 165 in size, and Woody, that board happened to be like a 145 or something. So it was actually really good to have a smaller board back then, although everybody probably wanted a bigger board because the bigger board was just a nicer board. That's a little bit how it transpired, I guess. It started in boogie boarding and ice hockey, and because the store happened to sell skateboards, we all decided to try some skateboarding and fell in love with that. And then they just picked up, the first couple rounds of snowboards, and we just had to try that because it was similar to a skateboard, and we were all falling in love with the skateboard. And then next thing you know, I guess sort of Liberty and Round Top kind of announced that they were going to let people try it. This would have been a couple years after lots of golf course sessions.
So roughly what time frame is this, like 88, 89?
I guess the golf course days probably were even a little bit earlier. I mean, I think the Liberty days probably would have been around 88, 89. And you couldn't just roll up and snowboard. Like they wanted to kind of watch you and grade you and tell you where you can and can't ride based on your ability level. Once you were so-called certified and had like a green or a purple or a blue or a black diamond, then that would distinguish where you could ride. And if you got caught in other areas, well, then you'd get in trouble for being in those areas.
What was that process like? You had to take some sort of test to be certified to ride in different areas?
Basically had to buy a lesson and then have an older guy that had more experience who would be nowadays kind of like a snowboard instructor, sort of grade you and tell you where you can and can't ride. I went through that process and came out like a high level medium. Oddly enough, I guess just because we skateboarded. And coincidentally, I think one of the guys that was doing the certifications at the time turned out to be another Big Sky friend of mine later in life. Like, a good 15, 20 years later, living in Big Sky, talking about back in the day, and come to find out that he was one of those instructors.
Dude, it's a small world.
Yeah.
So as you're going through this time, through the golf course, and then you're transitioning to real mountains and everything, you're obviously totally in love with snowboarding. Are you working? What's going on? How are you?
Yeah, I worked at Intensity Skates. We spoke about the store Caravan and Mike. Well, Mike decided at some point to branch off and make his own skate shop. And at the time, he would just travel around to all the hot skate spots and events and stuff like that, and he would always have product to sell, and it would always be the fresh new product. So Intensity kind of came out of that through just a birth out of a car kind of, and I was, I think, the second employee that they ever really had. They took us both on, me and another guy named Louie, right about the same time. Me and Louie started up in this little tiny office shack, and it was like a shack of a store and an office building. It was not where you would have a retail store whatsoever, but we got it done. And then shortly after, we had another employee, Larry, and then Mike's girlfriend was always involved, Vicky. So I mean, the root of us from the very beginning was Mike and Vicky and Louie and myself and Larry. And that was Intensity Skates. And I carried that job all through my high school years, and then afterwards, I always used it as a job to fall back on. He always would take me back, even into days when I had to go back into Maryland to help my grandparents later in life. I still went back and work that job, although then it was nicotine and capital and East Coast urethane. And so I did always work a lot. In fact, in the beginning, we wouldn't even get paid in paychecks. We would just get store credit racked up. And that's how we got paid. I don't even think I was old enough to get a paycheck when I first started.
A skate shop is probably one of the few stores you can walk into and talk to the people there and get to know them and barter something out consistently across the country. You know, almost any skate shop you go into, if you go in and develop a good rapport, it might take a couple times, but at least like an IOU or some sort of thing, I've seen it in every shop I've ever been into, assuming you develop that good rapport. So it's interesting. The barter system's alive and well in the skateboarding and snowboarding community.
Yeah, and it's as though it's the good deed thing or something like that, you know. A lot of good shops are always about helping the locals out, and if they lose a buck or something, but it gets a kid on a skateboard, well, I guess maybe you not only develop a customer, but you develop a friend and a long-term associate of the business, and maybe that's something to do with that.
I think you're exactly right. I can't tell you how many of my friends are people that I met while I was working at Pit Crew. I would say that the majority of my friends, my very best friends, are all people that I've met that were customers at one point, but you just kind of you blur that line. There's no customer employee relationship at a skate shop.
At a good shop, at a very good shop. I feel some shops have this higher than life attitude, which is sad for any shop to have, but I've noticed a few of those around the Montana area. I don't want to name any names, but they just rub you wrong, or the employees have an attitude of bigger than life because they're an employee of the store, and that's the complete wrong attitude to have in a skate shop.
And I've been guilty of that in past cases where if somebody comes in on rollerblades, for example, all of a sudden you're going to treat them differently than if it's your buddy coming in skateboarding, or if somebody comes in that just looks very different than the Washington, D.C. skate scene and they're, quote, mall grabbing their board, they may get treated a little bit differently. I've grown more conscious of it with age, but I've definitely been guilty of it in the past.
Yeah, I've probably been guilty of it myself.
So what's kind of sparked the idea to move to Montana? How did that transpire?
By way of Colorado, you know, I had left. I took some trips around the time I started driving. We started going up to Vermont and different places that were bigger than Pennsylvania to experience a little better of the snowboard scene, bigger mountains, and you weren't having to do all the verification stuff anymore. You could just, you know, more freely come and go as a customer, and snowboarding was falling into place. And
Still had to have your leash, though.
yeah, had to have the leash. Skateboarding, I was developing some sponsors and winning some events and stuff like that, and snowboarding, I guess I always felt I was a little bit better at snowboarding than skateboarding, and I started to notice through traveling around that I could kind of hold my own on a snowboard, and I guess eventually it got to a U.S. Open, and had the realization of like, wow, these guys aren't really any different than I am, and they're some of them are getting paid to do this, and you know, snowboarding as a career, and it was just starting to happen and stuff, and I thought to myself, I need to get out of the East Coast and get somewhere like Colorado where there's some big mountains and there's a scene, and just have more fun.
So you went to the Open at Stratton up in Vermont,
Yeah.
and did you partake in any of the infamous parties that I've heard of up there?
Not anything in particular. I mean, I've been to U.S. Opens as spectators and been to U.S. Opens as rider, and when I was as a rider, I was traveling a lot alone. I definitely went to some like bar style parties, none of the big house parties. I wasn't lucky enough to fall into any of those.
I've just heard multiple stories over the years, and I've never been, so I'm jealous in a lot of ways. I've been to the U.S. Open qualifiers that they had for a couple of years here at Seven Springs, and now those will be gone as of this year. But I heard that it was, in its heyday, just a huge party. So I'm jealous for anyone who did make it.
Well, yeah, the event itself they were definitely huge parties, and it was interesting. Yeah, it was cool to see it grow. I mean, the first ones, there was no pipe cutters, I mean, the pipes were all dug out. That's how early, I showed up as a spectator. I wish I could remember. I would think probably Turget probably won or something, if I had to guess. Honestly, that year I was busy riding. I was just having too much fun snowboarding and realizing, wow, I need to get in on this snowboard scene and go have more fun. And that's what it was. It wasn't like, damn, I need to move to Colorado and make money. It was, no, I need to move to Colorado and snowboard some real places and have some fun. And coincidentally, it just fell into money and sponsorship and easier living and stuff like that, which all developed through skateboarding once again. You get there, you start skateboarding at the skate park, and next thing you know, people are wanting to give you stuff to snowboard on because you skateboard well.
That just says something for how fast snowboarding was growing right during that period. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing, world industry snowboards hit the market, and there was the big stock market boom, and all kinds of snowboard companies were popping up left and right. And I remember seeing kids who were sponsored, like you said, for snowboarding, who the sponsors had only ever seen them skate and given them a snowboard.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it wasn't that uncommon. I guess a lot. I mean, it's true pretty much. If you could ride a skateboard, for the most part, you could rip on a snowboard. I mean, for the most part, and I guess a lot of people saw that to be the case, and lots of skateboarders were getting picked up and thrown on a snowboard, and there wasn't any standard of what could be done yet. So, it was kind of like, let's put you on this board and see what you can do.
John Cardiel kind of did that for a year or two. He kind of came in and blew the doors off everything, and then just dropped the snowboard and left.
Who was that?
Oh, John Cardiel.
Yeah, Cardiel, for sure. And I mean, Danny Way, and everybody really got their shot at it, and it was a big crossover mesh of board sport, really. And when you got into the California scene, you would start to see the surfers that were crossing over, like Christian Fletcher, Nathan, and those guys. So that was more coming from the West Coast, though, and those were the trifecta guys that were just good at all of it. We couldn't surf at all coming from the East Coast. There was no waves. I guess we thought there was waves, but
I can attest to that. I've been trying to learn how to surf for the past 4 years here, and you've got to there's like little tiny windows where one day out of the month it'll be good, and that better line up with the one day that you can drive 3.5 hours and make it to the beach. So you're out in Colorado, you're competing. Who are your sponsors at this time?
God, I mean, we went through so many at the time, but the original ones, there was a company called Clockwork, which was Brian Patch. He's an X Games skater. I'm sure you're probably aware of him. But,
oh, yeah.
He came from Indiana with some guys, and he was blowing up in skateboarding and wanted to do a snowboard company. And they birthed this company, Clockwork, and we hit it really big because we were from Summit County. Later, everybody wanted to make the move to Southern California from Summit County, which for business purposes was a pretty good move, and it just lost a customer appeal, I kind of think, taking it from the mountains of Summit County, where we were one of the first young guns to come out of there, probably before Unity. I can't think of what they would have maybe been even maybe Summit Boards or something. I'm not even sure back then. They were present at the time, but I think it was under a different name. And I could be mistaken, but I mean, we went through all kinds of different sponsors. Airwalk was big at giving people boots, and I went through various goggle sponsors with Bolay and Arnett.
At what point?
Clothing, we were kind of just, I mean, we were developing clothing at the time, like we were still taking like large baggy jeans and wearing like snow pants underneath and sporting big old baggy jeans over the snow pants for style. And then eventually that kind of led into different clothing companies around the Colorado area. There was Twist and a company called Fumes. I mean, there was all kinds of little clothing companies at the time. And Andy Howe became involved in it, doing a company called Zero Sophisto. So I became involved with him in developing real snow gear. But like I said in the beginning, we were taking like the crazy neon Burton wear or Sims wear, and we were using it as dry layers underneath other layers and kind of molding into what we wanted to have. It was almost as though it was still all ski gear. Even the snowboard gear had a lot of ski gear aspects to it.
Yeah, it almost sounds like my mountain biking friends that wear spandex, but then put like regular shorts over it so nobody knows. It's like, yeah, I've got to use this stuff. It's good, but I don't want this picture to end up anywhere of me walking around in spandex.
Right. It had a spandex feel, tight with neon colors. Hip packish.
Yeah, exactly. So you're in Colorado and you're kind of doing all this work with different sponsors. It sounds like you're not just like, hey, I'll take the stuff, but you're also giving them feedback. At what point did you start to think?
A lot of development was going on for sure.
Right. And some of the stuff that we'll get to in a little bit are some of the businesses that you've done yourself. At what point did you start to get that entrepreneurial bug? Is it while you're riding and doing this development, or does that occur later?
Well, I definitely, I had started to develop it maybe even prior to that in the skateboarding days. But, with my name and my ability to snowboard, it was always there in my mind. I guess I always felt like no matter what, there was going to be a time when there was a Mountjoy snowboard. Thanks to Sims and Barfoot and Lamar and Burton and, these guys that I originally never even put two and two together that those were real people. But as I got older and into the industry, I was like, oh my God, those are real people.
And just to give you the contrast of where you grew up with, probably different magazines available and different videos and what have you, where we grew up, when you got a little bit of snowboarding in a Thrasher magazine, or if somebody got a hold of an actual snowboarding magazine, that was a big deal. And we would own it and tear every little part of it apart. And the one Barfoot ad I saw, I interpreted as barefoot. And so my friend Andy and I argued for years. It was his Thrasher, and I didn't have access to it, and argued for years in school over whether it was barefoot or barfoot. And I was obviously wrong. That was every time I see Chuck Barfoot, I'm like, oh man, that was a year of my life that I was a total idiot, just totally wrong.
Well, I think I completely called it wrong too. Till any of us knew any better. Yeah, I mean, it was a real booming time. The trade shows were just growing, and I guess it was the first big upwave of the industry, probably. And you've been in it long enough to see the cycles that skate and snowboard go through, the ups and the downs, and sometimes it's weather related, sometimes it's churn aspects, and but it's always up and down over the years, and if it has a few down years, it's bound to have some up years in the future. And this was probably going right through the first major upswing. God, I couldn't even tell you how many different small companies and board companies, and I mean there was hundreds.
Yeah, it's fun to be a part of it when it's like that, and there's people throwing money around left and right, and the trade shows are huge, and there's, why are there celebrities at a snowboarding trade show?
Right.
Was that a porn star at a snowboarding trade show? What the heck is going on here?
And I think we're back. Well, over the years, we've been back into one of those stages where some of the bigger guys are throwing the money around to the smaller guys, and it's sort of rebirthing itself kind of right now, I sort of think. Also, it's also losing some, but it seems to be rebirthing a bit.
Yeah.
So I had always had that in the back of my mind, that one day I was going to do it. Well, everything lined up to do it, and it fell into place. And, well, of course, after everything lined up and it fell into place, well, then all hell broke loose. And the bottom fell out.
Before we get to that, what was the transition from Colorado to Montana? How did you end up at Big Sky? I'm so fascinated by that.
Well, there was some family issues where my grandparents needed some assistance in life, just to continue living in their home, and there was no one else to help them. And so I decided I would vacate Colorado and go back into Maryland, and I would help them out. And I went back to work, and once again, intensity, which was probably, I think intensity was still around at the time, but I was working more so at the skateboard division, at the wheel and the deck company, and selling boards to shops like Pit Crew and all the other shops around. But main thing that I was there was to help my grandparents, and I coincidentally left right in one of the big booms, and I lost the opportunity. I lost a lot of opportunity in the business of snowboarding, and came back later and decided, okay, I'm going to go somewhere different, which happened to be Montana. I wanted to get out of the scene, basically, which is odd because, looking back at it, you got to be involved in part of the scene somewhere, or no one wants anything to do with you. And I guess at the time, I didn't really know that at the time, but also I figured, well, I'm Mountjoy. I'm going to fucking make it whether I'm in the scene or not, basically, is the attitude that I had. So I went to Missoula, Montana, and just started riding snowball every day. And then I got a couple trips in to Big Sky, and I was like, oh, well, this is more familiar to me. This is, a large-style resort, lifts everywhere. Still no kind of park or anything. So much mountain that, you could just shred the entire mountain any way you wanted. And so I quickly left Missoula and got myself into Big Sky.
I didn't know you were up in Missoula. I went to college there for a little bit and spent a good bit of time at Snow Bowl.
Yeah.
And a lot of my family's there now. So we grew up about 100, maybe almost 200 miles east of Missoula, right on the High Line, and northeast, and we would go over that direction. Usually we would hit Big Mountain in Kalispell. I don't know if you ever made it up there. Now they call it Whitefish Mountain.
One time, and I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, it gets socked in lots of times for sure. That's how they get the big snow ghosts, they call them, where the trees are just all huge snowballs, basically.
But so that's how I ended up in Montana, basically trying to take myself out of the scene. And so then I get up into Montana, and I find it real hard to get sponsors. Although, Planet Earth was pretty solid behind me at the time, and I'd get LibTech boards and some Mervin boards here and there from buddies that worked at the factory. And that actually I fell in with 32, way back then. So I was able to pull it off, and there was some other kids that, came out of Montana. It was just a very tough scene to come up out of, for sure.
Well, like you said, there was no park, and that's the way that snowboarding was transitioning. Nobody's making it big, Jeremy Jones style, Big Mountain Jeremy Jones style for the most part. That's that's a unicorn. That's one in a million, and very few people are going to come out of Big Sky, Montana, being the best free rider, being able to ride the gnarliest shit, and take that anywhere. That's a very small niche.
And so I literally would have sponsors say that, like, why didn't you go back to Colorado, or why didn't you go to California? Why'd you go to Montana? And I say, because I didn't want to be in that big major scene. I figured I could make my own scene, or I could do my own thing over here. The scene could be bigger than just this small little place of Colorado or California. The whole country was the scene or whatever, as far as I was concerned. And I started doing traveling for sure to make up for it here and there, and just had to try harder and stuff like that, and would always get denied somewhat because of being in Montana. But ultimately, I would always pull through, and somebody would be there for me. And like I said, it pretty heavily was Planet Earth for a while, and doing development with 32 when it was, God, probably even before Joe was doing it, Joe Curtis. It was as far.
You probably knew like Siskar. Did you know? I can't remember his first name, but Siskar was one of the big guys there.
There was a guy I think named Noel, I believe. It all started through the warranty. Like I just was having problems with my boots, and so I would call them up and kind of talk to them about my problems. And I had been through so much development processes over the years that I kind of knew how to bring up that topic and get involved in the development. And so
I think Noel does all 32S America, all Soltec returns, or at least he did a couple years ago while I was at Pit Crew.
Yeah, he definitely did for years and years. And so eventually, talking with Noel, he was like, well, I'm going to hook you up with Joe. And I got hooked up with Joe, and he'd always been a long-time Burton pro. And coming through Colorado and Vail, we both knew of each other, but had never really met. And it just slowly all developed from there. So I actually was able to pull it off in Montana. I'm really glad that I did come to Montana. And then I spent my years at Mammoth, at later, and Mount Hood, and back in Colorado. But I called Montana home. It was my shop sponsor that ultimately always brought me back to the East Coast. Is that I carried a shop sponsor called Switch, which was out of Newark, Delaware, strictly because they were such a cool shop. And so, living in Colorado and having all my other bigger sponsors, I went with the shop sponsor from Delaware because I was from the Maryland area, and Intensity wasn't really into the big snowboard scene or anything, so it wasn't like I was going to use them as my shop sponsor. They were always my skateboard shop sponsor growing up. When everything got into snowboarding, I went with Switch. It was called Switch Skate and Snow, and they're responsible for some of the best riders from the East Coast over the years. Girl riders, Kyla Duffy, the Cass brothers, all came through Switch. And yeah, they were really down for the sport. And so, we were from all the kids from all the Northeast area all wanted to ride for them.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I'll bet that you could go back to Switch today and everything would be, in a lot of ways, the same, right? It's still a family. And that's the difference between shop sponsorship and any of the other companies, is that you go back to the shop, and that's like a lifetime deal. Even if you're not on their web page or their team listing, wherever, you're still part of the family.
Yeah. And I still do see a lot of those same guys in the conventions and stuff. And yeah, that's what, I would always meet up with the owners during Vegas, and we would just have huge parties. And the owners were real fun to party with. They would always bring some of us kids out, and riders or whatever. I mean, we were kids.
So let's get back to Montana. You went there to get away from the whole scene, but then when I visited you, you built one of the best parks that I've ever seen in my life, and we're running it. You created a whole scene.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It got to the, well, I mean, it needed it, man. I mean, it deserved it and it needed it, and I guess it got it. I'm glad that you say that, because it was all stripped away from me later. But yeah, I mean, we had one hell of a good run at it while it lasted, that's for sure. And I don't think it's quite ever been the same since I stopped doing it. But yeah, at the time I spent a lot of time in Mammoth and Salt Lake and stuff. So I was getting to know what I would call the real builders, you know, like just all the major parks. I just wanted to see Montana get something at a world-class level like its mountains, you know. I mean, we had this, probably what I would consider the best mountain in the world, or one of them. And so why didn't we have one of the best parks to match it? And basically that was my goal, to give it to it. At the time, Big Sky wasn't really interested in it, so we took the idea to Moonlight, which was a separate ski resort. Now it's all one big ski resort. But they were willing to have myself and my ideas and my crew, and basically said, what do you need? And we gave them an idea of a budget and scored a pile of metal and a shop to work in and plastic, and just kind of took on what I thought was some of the best building styles and combined them and made what I made. You know, taking some ideas from Mammoth and taking some ideas from Jared at Winkler down in Salt Lake, and Mouse and Steve and all those guys, and taking some ideas from the Tahoe area, and basically just blending them all together and creating my own.
You and the rest of the park crew also had you did your own outerwear with the mountain too, didn't you? I don't know if you worked that through a company,
we did
or
stuff with 686. We did this like embroidery on the jackets that it had a stripe effect to it, kind of off. It was zero gravity, so off the first and the last letter of the Z and the Y, we kind of carried a striped look to it. But with the pants, we went with this, like, they basically had a matching green color. So all of our features at the time were black and green, and so we just went with these suits that were black and green, and we got on a kick where everybody we were involved with at the time had something black and green. We had drop gloves that were green, and we had dragon goggles that were like either the Daylax, or they did a black and green striped model one year. And so we just would get involved with all these different companies that had the black and green, and companies that generally I was behind or supported me. I always picked stuff that I truly enjoyed and loved their product. You know, I never really went with whatever I had to. I mean, I was lucky in a sense to be able to do that. You know, some people got to take what they got to take, but you know, I just would pick these companies because I really believed in them and loved their product, and then we would just look for matching goods from there.
So you're running the park at Moonlight, and when do you start to are you doing Mountjoy Snowboards before that, or is that right in the same timeline?
That was towards the end of it all. Like let's let the dog out here. Go. I was doing a lot of traveling during the off seasons, and I would extend my seasons mostly by spending time in Mammoth. I mean, you get in these weather patterns. Like, for example, this year, you know, Colorado really would have been the place to be, but luckily during those years in the early to mid 2000s, Mammoth was the one getting all the snow. So I was lucky. I jumped on the MVP passes, and I lived in Montana. But for 6 years, I always carried a pass at Mammoth also, and that really opened the door to a lot of stuff, both for working with my sponsors and then bringing events to Montana, like the Peanut Butter Rail Jam, for example, and possibly the boot camp that we did and stuff. I attribute a lot of that to the time I spent at Mammoth, just making connections, or like we would go down there every year and there would be the Peanut Butter Rail Jam, and I just thought it was the greatest event because it was free, and it would bring out hundreds of kids for free to ride this event and just party and have sandwiches and drinks, and everybody looked like they had so much fun. And I just approached the guys and was basically like, can we do this in Montana? I built this whole park scene up there, and it'd be great to have you guys there. And they were interested in making a stop in Montana, and that led to the Peanut Butter Rail Jams coming to Montana. And we were involved a lot in the cutters camps too. Like, our resort was really good at sending myself and my crew each year to the cutters camps, and so we would stay on top of the whole building scene and be there with everybody, and then just come back to Montana. But I would really say that Mammoth did a lot for me with just developing that whole scene that you saw take place. It was about 5 years into it, I guess, when I finally decided to do the Mountjoy snowboards. It had a lot to do with what I saw going on at the trade shows and noticing that money was going back from corporations to smaller companies. Now I wish I could have got my hands in some of that money. Instead, I took it all upon myself, which has its good and its bads. I mean,
so to start Mountjoy Snowboards, did you finance it? Did you save up a bunch of money? Did you call in favors from friends and family? How did you get it off the ground?
Pretty much from friends and family. Calling in favors from friends and family, having a little bit of money from inheritance to work with, and at the time, I was making pretty good money too, so everything just lined up. I started looking for a manufacturer, came up with a couple different options around America, tried a few of them, had some options in China, was more interested in trying stuff in America. I, at the time, was involved pretty heavily with Volcom and the Peanut Butter Rail Jam, so I decided that I was going to use that as my marketing scheme, basically, and I was going to fly into every Volcom Peanut Butter Rail Jam around the country, and that would be my marketing platform, and it was working great until you received the cease and desist order.
Oh, shit. It's kind of reminding me
we
of...
can't talk too much about, but if
Right.
anybody knows me and my brand and has seen my product, they will completely understand what happened.
Right. I don't eat candy bars, but we can make a guess as to what that involved. So it reminds me of your marketing strategy. Reminds me very much if you ever watch the Tour de France, and they'll have most recently it was a person in a water bottle, for this water bottle that has a screw off bottom, so it's easier to clean, and he'll just run next to every stage. So he's where the action is, and that's kind of what I think you just described as your marketing plan as well, is to go where the action is. Plus, it's fun, right? You get to ride, you get to be at a cool contest.
Yeah, and I mean, I would actually participate in all of them for, whether I did well or not. I mean, I was having fun, and sometimes I would make it into the finals, and sometimes I wouldn't. And sometimes I would place and sometimes I wouldn't. And those guys were great. Even before I was traveling with them, the first couple years that we did it, like I qualified and went to the real finals and everything. And then after that, they would just pretty much invite me to the finals. And it was pretty fun. I mean, I was always one of the older guys doing it, but I was still just loving it and doing it. And it really helped, to be present on a board more than just having someone yell out like Mountjoy Snowboards or something. Instead it's there's Chris Mountjoy riding Mountjoy Snowboards.
Well, and people meet you and they buy you more than the snowboard. They're buying the relationship that hey, I met that guy. He was fucking cool. He ripped. He makes good shit. I want to buy it.
Right.
What was the go-to-market strategy? Were you in several shops? Were you selling direct online?
Well, I learned a lot through all that situation. And initially I was doing the shop thing and the online thing and selling direct and kind of hitting it from every different angle. What I came to realize with the shop game was it's really hard for a young company. It's hard to explain, I guess. Like, here you have this board that is easily worth this high price, but basically that's what it comes down to. The shop wants to sell your board and make more money off your board than you do. And it's hard for a company in the early days to win that customer base over with such a high price. But yet your product is completely worth it and on the same level as another board of the same value. But you're new, so you don't really have that history behind you, to be worthy of that or whatever. So I found myself in this big catch-22 of like, do I sell to the store and lose money? It's funny to say lose money because you're still making money, but I mean, you coming from the store can understand this. Someone else looking in is probably like, this is a bunch of gibberish or something, but it just really threw me off to see the store make more money than a small company. Why couldn't we bring the margin levels down to an equal level at least and give the customer a little bit better of a price, and we both make the same margin?
Yeah, and some of that goes back probably to your manufacturing. So you're competing against manufacturers who are doing 10, 20x the volume, getting a lower per unit price in their hands per snowboard. So they're able to, when they go to XYZ snowboard shop and say, okay, this is your wholesale price, they're still marking it up and doubling their money on it. If you've only made, and I don't say only because it's a huge feat to make a snowboard company, Chris, but if you've only made 100 boards, you're not going to get those same discounts from that snowboard manufacturer. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that there's however many snowboard companies, well, there's only, maybe this is a big number and I'm way off, 20 or 30 or more or less manufacturers. So for almost every company that's out there, a lot of them are coming out of the same place. And as I think of it more, it's probably even closer to 20, if not less.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But that's the challenge, is just everybody's got to make their money along the way. And when you said lose money, you're talking about going direct to consumer. So instead of selling it for half the price or less to a wholesale or to a shop, you can sell it direct to the end user, cut out the middleman. But you also have that shop history, and if you're like me, you would struggle with, is that the right thing to do? Is that the best thing for the industry? So I like the fact that you kind of took a broad net approach and kind of saw what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, like I said, I went into it at all angles, and I honestly didn't really know what was going to work, that was all new to me at the time, and for all the experience that I did have, I still didn't have that knowledge, and so I learned a lot through that. I think that the happy medium is something of both. You can't cut the store out, and at the same time, you can't let the store cut your customer out. So somewhere in between there's that happy medium, and that's where I need the help now of somebody behind me besides my illness. That brings a whole nother new realm into this whole picture, is my disease. So
Absolutely. And I want to definitely get to that in 1 second, but you reminded me of a unique business model that I believe that Rome is doing, where they said, okay, we've got an audience of people ready to buy from us online, but we want to support our shops. So we're going to basically track the zip code and put together all of this this programming. And they had to go out of pocket to develop the infrastructure for this system that says, all right, Nate Muson in southern Pennsylvania bought a Rome agent off of the Rome website. What's the nearest shop to him? What's the nearest Rome dealer to him? We're going to give them credit. And that's probably one of the most fair ways to do it. So Rome's still making the sale, it's just still happening, and the shop's still being supported by it.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So before we jump into what's going on with your disease, you had one more huge thing that was going on at the time during Mountjoy and during some of the time that you were working at the snowboard park. You also built a huge, I'd say, Woodward level skate park with with like a foam pit and everything too.
I did some crazy stuff, I guess. I had my own fantasy factory for a while. That's for sure. Yeah, when things are going good, the sky's the limit. That's sort of how I would put it. Yeah, I actually had decided it was right along the lines of a Woodward type of place. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time for the town of Bozeman, and ultimately I think it could have probably made it in the long run. This was called the Landing Pad. You can still find remnants of it online and Facebook and stuff. I never deleted the account, but so people can look and see the past that it was there and kind of what fun people were having at the time and stuff. But the overhead that it takes to run a place like that is just phenomenal. With the building alone, that's what was really the crusher. At the time, I had income coming from building the park. I had my snowboard company taking off. I had another business that was making money. Everything was just in line, and like I said, when things are in line, you just kind of look as the sky's the limit. So I said, let's go for it, and I don't regret any of it by any means. It was some of the best stuff I've ever done. The combination of all of it at once, in particular, it was big time. It was good time. That was indoor launch ramps for snow and skate, and a giant foam pit, and half pipes and skate ramps, and really good time.
I think the only thing it was missing was like a barracks for people to crash at next to it, so you'd have the full circle. That was some sort of food thing, so it would be a huge destination thing that from what I could garner, I didn't get to go there, but I wanted to based off of your Facebook posts. Is it looked like the sort of thing that would be like a camp or like a destination style place.
Yeah, and where we are in the country allows for that too, because you have such tourism with the Yellowstone National Park. Ultimately I was looking to tap into that realm, like you said, and be a destination. But Bozeman is a very small city, so when you get into the true numbers of population and the pool of people that you have to pick from to make a business like that sustain itself, say, without the tourism traffic, you're looking at very small numbers.
Yeah, plus, if it's like every skate park that I've been to that's privately ran, you've got the best guys at the park definitely aren't paying.
Right.
That's always a challenge, too. So what happened with your sickness? How did that come on? What is it exactly? And can we talk about that a little bit?
Well, what I've got is stage 3 lung cancer. It's an inoperable situation. So basically, that means they can't just go cut the tumor out of my lung. We can keep fighting the tumor out with rounds of chemo or radiation, and maybe it never comes back. Maybe it keeps coming back. It's been real interesting. I mean, it's been life changing for sure. Like some of it's been a blessing, some of it's complete hell. But I'm glad to have the chance to work through it and continue snowboarding and to try to fight a disease that has hurt my family pretty hard over the years and taken people like aunts and uncles and fathers and things like that. And it's brought me back closer to some other friends that are snowboarders that also have cancer, and brought me together with a foundation called Strap In for Life, which is a cancer foundation made up of snowboarders. It was originally started by Dave Tuck. Was a great friend of a lot of ours and a really good skateboarder and snowboarder. He developed pancreatic cancer, and he passed away, I guess, last summer, in July last summer. He fought for about, I think, 2 to 3 years, I believe. I could be mistaken on that, but everyone that we know knows somebody with cancer. So if I don't get angry at the situation too much. I kind of glad that I can be someone that can be strong and represent both the disease and snowboarding. And what it makes me want, though, is I need to find someone to help me with my company for the future, basically, because I won't always be here. So
The thing that hits home for me the most personally is that I just spent a week with my mom, who is in 1 year and 6 months of remission from leukemia. And she came out and visited, and she's kind of doing this tour. And she's happy. She's extremely happy to be on the other side of it, or she feels like it for now. But as we dug in deeper in conversation, once you've had it, you never feel safe again. It could pop back up on her, right? So
completely. And I mean, I've been through a remission state too, and you get all excited. You're in remission. You think you're clean, and for me, then a tumor popped up in my brain. So the timeline of all this for me would be, I guess, in the spring of 13, I believe. So approximately a year and a half ago, I had my first symptoms turn up in my chest. I went through my treatments, came out of the summer pretty much whipping its ass. Everything looked pretty good. I think, okay, I'm going to go into winter in a state of remission. And then right as October, November come around, I started having like visual hallucinations and developing some problems that were noticeable within my brain. And it turns out that I had a metastasis, which is a new growth in my brain. So I was then treated with a special type of radiation that basically zapped the tumor out of my brain. That treatment was done about 3 days before the lifts opened in Big Sky last year. I was on the snow opening day riding, literally 72 hours after getting a tumor zapped out of my brain. I've got some low-grade park footage from it somewhere that makes me pretty proud of.
absolutely, that's so fascinating. And was that against doctor's orders, or did they say, oh, you can do this?
They didn't tell me not to do it. Yeah, that's how I would sum it up. I mean, yeah, they didn't tell me not to do it, but basically, if I was capable of doing it, do it. They want me to do everything possible. They want me to live life as normal can be, or else the disease is going to get the better of you. So, if you're capable, do it. And I would say that to anybody that's listening to this that might be wondering or thinking to themselves like, oh, I have cancer, I can't do this. No, don't think that there's anything that you can't do.
Or for anyone that doesn't have cancer, Chris, there's a quote that I think of all the time when I see people in the world that are just kind of cogs in the wheel, and it's that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And here you are, before cancer, before knowing there's that impending timeline, you just in having a snowboard career, that's like you're a superstar. That's it. That's awesome. And then you took that farther and said, well, I want to have my own snowboard company, or I want to design the best snowboard park in Montana, or I want to design a whole skate park in Montana. Like, all of those things are once in a lifetime things, or things that never happen for 99% of the people. 99% of the people just go to work, come home, watch TV.
Yeah, before I forget, I have to give big major respects to Todd Franzen. He's an old pro snowboarder from Morrow, and he would be my go-to contact survivor of the greatest. He's the man for Strap In for Life. Like I said, Dave was the one that started it, but now, Todd's taken a lot of the responsibilities upon himself, and also Mike Daniels. Those guys are majorly behind this foundation that I believe so strong in, and do what I can to make people aware of, and it's great. It's great to have those guys in that foundation to help and be there to talk to and fall back on, and also share with people what's going on.
Did you get a Strap In for Life tattoo? Did I see that at some point?
Yeah, I've got one on me.
That's awesome. My mom, actually, I reached out to Mike Rogers at Grind for Life. I would call them kind of sister organizations during my mom's whole thing. And
they're incredibly great to me. Mike's awesome, and I mean they help me huge too.
Yeah, she said it was so easy. She said all these other little things that she went through, you always had to jump through hoops. There was extra paperwork. She said the Grind for Life money just showed up. It was like checks in the mail, no problem.
Yeah, he's really helped me huge at times, and Mike himself is just such an inspiration to watch, and yeah, I mean I really love those guys in that foundation, and you're right, they're great.
And I don't know the details, but when you look at all the other ways that there's all these other big organizations out there, once you start to look at if you donate to the Red Cross or some of these other breast cancer organizations and what have you, it's like a percentage of your actual donation ends up in the end user's hands. Knowing my interactions with Mike and knowing that the guys at Strap In for Life are snowboarders, I can guarantee you that they're not like these huge six-figure CEOs with six-figure executives, basically milking this institution of a heck, my mind's not working. What do you call it when you have an institution like Strap In for Life?
Well, basically you're saying running the 503(c) with all the money and providing themselves with charity.
Yeah, nonprofit was the word that I was looking for.
Yeah.
So they're not milking the nonprofit. They're actually putting the money to work. They're putting the money in the hands of people that need it, like yourself.
No, I mean you can attest to that. You've seen it through your mom, and I mean I'm a witness to it for sure. Like you said, you contact Mike and let him know that you need something, and he's gonna be there for you.
So you said that there were some blessings through this process. What has changed on your outlook in life and as far as the positive?
Well, going through all those ups and downs, and businesses coming and going, and money, and I guess I found that I've become a better person all around, and I cherish life more so, and I don't worry about money, and I don't worry about just dumb stuff that you'd find yourself wasting time on prior to catching a disease like that. I think at times I've been a little too sick for it to transpire into my actual riding or skating, but I see it's that big of a change. Like, I probably actually could or would ride better or skate better, along with just being this different person. It just changed me, man. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I've become a happier, better person, even though I have this major burden.
Well, it's a perspective shift without a doubt. And one of the things that my mom always was referencing while she was here was her new birthday. And she's like, Nate, it's more than just a saying. You are different. You feel different. You feel alive and on all these different levels. So I hesitate to say that I can relate. I can relate through her stories and other folks that I know. But I can guess that probably feel, like you said, less worried about all the minutia of day-to-day life and more in the moment.
But what it leaves me with is I want to find somebody that can help carry my brand through the future. Basically, I might have 20 years left, or I might have 20 days left. You just really don't know. And I'd like to find someone that can help with my brand and can carry my snowboards into the future, whether I'm with them or not.
And how does that, well, first, let me ask, are there snowboards available right now?
Yes, I've got snowboards for sure.
And how would folks find them?
Best way to look at them would be on Facebook. Just look up Mountjoy Snowboards. All the boards are there. I through all the legal issues involved, I took the website down and just haven't had a chance to get it back up. So in terms of sales, I just take direct messages from people, and go from there. It's definitely not the best way to make a lot of sales by any means, but it's what I have to rely on at the moment. So you just basically would find me on Facebook and message me. I mean, for that matter, you can find me personally on Facebook, Chris Mountjoy. But the boards have their own under Mountjoy Snowboards, and they're all represented there online, and you can see them. And they're made in America and very good snowboards. They all go for $300 to $350 in price, and for now, that's the best I can do until I can get a website store back up and running.
And is the cease and desist preventing the website store right now? What's kind of the standing?
Well,
what can you talk about there?
The ability to sell off what I have. So
Okay.
Basically, when you would go to Facebook and see what's there, the ones that got me in trouble are considered limited edition boards now, which is great for the long run in the future. I was allowed to sell them. I just can't make any more. But it creates a product for me that's it's a special board. I can't ever do it again without a new deal. And if people like them, they should get them while they can, because they're not going to always be available. And they are truly limited edition, as about as limited gets.
But the name Mountjoy Snowboards is okay. So,
Yes.
Like you said, you're looking for someone to partner with in the future. It's not someone that has to work through legalese of freeing up the name. You're okay to do business.
Right. I'm completely fine as far as that goes. And um, yeah, I have some ideas I don't want to really talk about, but yeah, I'm completely freed up. I can make all the Mountjoy snowboards I want. They can't stop me from that. I just can't make them look a certain way.
What do you think I think about this all the time. What do you think the future trend in snowboarding is? And I have my thoughts, but I'll hold them back as far as...
I think it's going back to smaller companies that are rider influenced and run, even if they are major corporations. I mean, see, that's hard for people to understand that look in at the industry. Someone might not realize that like a company like Quicksilver basically owns half the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what I see is the few major corporations that do own and operate everything looking more towards rider influenced smaller brands that make an impact.
Yep, I would totally have to agree, and I think that's right where you're at with Mountjoy in a lot of ways. How long have the boards been on the market? 3, 4, or 5 years?
Probably three to four.
And that's very common where, like you were talking earlier about having a marketing plan, right? Or a marketing scheme of riding in all the different contests. Right. It takes that much time to become a brand that people are aware of.
I think it takes even more. I think that's the fast route even.
So if there's somebody out there that does want to get in touch with you, what is the best way? Is that Facebook direct message, or do you have an email address that you prefer?
Facebook is kind of the modern day phone book, so Facebook's always good. My email is incredibly easy. I've had it for so long that it's just mountjoy@hotmail. But I sort of see nowadays Facebook is like the Yellow Pages. If you're looking for someone or something and you don't know how to find it, that's the first place to look.
So I've got one final question for you, dude. If there's somebody out there that wants to help someone with cancer, from your point of view, what's one of the most impactful things that they can do, financially or otherwise?
Man, just be there for the person. Just be there and be strong. Like, definitely people with cancer have financial issues, that's for damn sure. But I think a lot of the people with cancer don't even care that much about the financial aspects of it. Just having a team of people that show support and strength behind them. That's something that's been great on Facebook, to have this group of people that, they are your friends, whether they're just digital friends or maybe they're your real friends, but those people are huge to people with cancer. Like, you got people that you've never met before except on Facebook, and they're always there behind you, giving you support or strength. So yeah, just like always being there for those people and consistently showing strength and well-being, financially or not. I think that's what's most important.
That's awesome. My uncle, who had colon cancer, pre-Facebook, gave me very similar advice. He said, if you're thinking about somebody, just call them. Just call them now, because you don't know if you'll have the chance in the future. Just call them now. If you're thinking, don't waste the time. Just reach out to them now. So very similar advice, and I think that goes probably for people beyond, someone with cancer. It really.
Oh yeah.
anyone who's is in a tight spot could use that outreach. If you're thinking of them, reach out to them.
No, I agree completely.
So it's been awesome to talk with you. It's been so good to reconnect with you. If I make it out to Montana this year, I will definitely hit you up.
Yeah, I really want to come back to Pennsylvania, as odd as that sounds, but I've been wanting to do it for years, and I just, through the ups and downs of the cancer and the finances, it's fallen off my map, but I really do want to get out there I'd love to spend a month and just have a rental car and, visit all the Poconos resorts and Round Top and Liberty and Wisp and all these places that I grew up in. It'd be great.
Yep, should be up at Big Boulder next week. It looks like they'll be open either there or Seven Springs. And I told you before, you've always got a place to stay in southern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of this, Nate.
No problem.
And great to talk to you too.
Thank you for listening to the Not Snowboarding podcast. To hear more episodes, go to www.notsnowboardingpodcast.com.
I want to dedicate this episode to my Uncle Scott Katzman. Scott took me snowboarding at my first real resort on my first real board with actual metal edges as opposed to my plastic black snow mogul monster that I would ride down the sledding hill near my house. As Chris said, be there for someone. Scott was there for me. I think I'd still be snowboarding if not for him, but maybe not. He was there to fan the flame, so to say. He saw a 10-year-old kid that had the passion but didn't have the means to get to the mountain or get a real board. He bridged those gaps for me. Thank you, Scott. Join us next week when we, I suppose, if AJ is available. Either way, we'll chat with one of the following folks. Snowboard blogger Daniel's Burritos and Snow Cochran, Yo Beat founder Brooke Geary, or snowboarding legend Terry A. Hawkinson. Finally, thank you so much for all of the positive iTunes reviews. The podcast actually climbed all the way up to number 7 on iTunes' new and noteworthy list, right next to other popular podcasts like Serial and The Jon Stewart Show. Crazy. Shoot me a note on Twitter at Nate Mousson or via email nate@shredsouls.com and let me know who you'd like to hear on the podcast in future episodes. Until next week, peace and pray for snow.